Here we are again, another day of delivering lunches for Idabel Public Schools. Hello, my name is Sharon Hill-Wooten. I am an English teacher slash special education teacher slash school bus driver at Idabel Public Schools. I teach at Idabel High School. This is my 29th year of teaching, but it's my 20th year at Idabel High School. On November 9th, I went into work, drove my school bus route. I went into work. About third period, I started to not feel well. Didn't really think anything about it. I just knew that I didn't feel well. And so as my students transition from my class to another class, my practice was to have them move to the door, and I would sanitize all of the area with which they had contact. So the chairs, the tables, everything that they made contact with, I sanitized it. And I did that between each class period. I didn't require the students to do it. I did it myself. And that way I knew that it was thoroughly sanitized. And so I did that. And I went back and I sat in my chair and my shoulders literally dropped. And I knew at that point that I was not well. I took my temperature, it was elevated. I called the principal secretary. I explained to her that I was not feeling well and that I needed to leave. And at that time, she started looking for someone to cover my classes. Well, my colleague across the hall came and opened my door, and she told me she was covering my class as well as her class. And so I left, and I came home, and I went to bed, and I slept 4 hours. And when I woke, I felt worse. So I took my temperature, and it was even more elevated. So I went to the emergency room, and because I was there with the possibility of being a COVID patient, they took my admittance information and they sent me to my car. And I was to wait in my car until a nurse contacted me. So I sat in my car, actually napped, slept, for about 2.5 hours. And then a nurse came out and I went into the emergency room. They took 2 tests. They administered a flu test and a COVID test. And the COVID came back positive. So I saw the doctor. He explained to me there's no cure for COVID. It's, go through the quarantine process, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, but there's no cure. So I came home and I quarantined. Mind you, I kept in touch with the school nurse during the entire duration of my quarantine. So as it neared the end of my quarantine, I was really unsure what I needed to do. So I called her. She explained to me that, once I quarantined for 14 days, I could return to my classroom. And yet I knew I still didn't feel well. I talked to my personal physician. He suggested that I get a negative test before returning to my classroom. So I chose to follow the directive of my personal physician. I did not return to work that Monday. That Tuesday, I was so sick to the point that I called 911. And the ambulance came, picked me up, took me to the local hospital, which is McCurtain Memorial Hospital. Now, in my mind, I thought that when they took me to that hospital, I thought I flew out via air flight that night. That was not the case. I was in the hospital for 2 days at McCurdy Memorial Hospital that I have no memory of. I do not remember being admitted. I do not remember my stay at the hospital. The next memory I have is of being placed onto the helicopter and told that I was going to Dallas, to a hospital in Dallas. The next memory I have after that is of waking up in the COVID unit at Baylor White Medical Center in Plano. Now, between that time, COVID had caused a blood clot in my right leg that required 2 surgeries. I don't remember that. I have no recollection of the surgery or any of that. In the COVID unit, I needed blood, so I received 2 units of blood while I was there. Had doctors coming in regularly, talking with me about different aspects of my foot, with the possibility that that I would have something called drop foot. There was a special device that I needed, and so we ordered that so that when I start to wearing shoes again, because right now my right foot is so swollen, I cannot put it in a shoe. So when I start wearing shoes again, I'll put the device on in order for me to be able to weight bear on my right leg. Right now, I walk with the assistance of a walker. Wherever I go, I use a walker. If I'm up and mobile, I have to use a walker. I cannot weight bear on my right leg. Now, mind you, it is getting stronger from where I was 2 weeks ago to where I am today. Is, to me, it's 100%. And yet I still know that I have so much farther to go. I had 14 staples on the right side of my leg. I had 14 staples on the inside of my right leg. And I also had 10 staples in another area on my body. So I had 38 staples in my body. All the results of COVID causing a blood clot in my right leg. I've got to be back in Dallas later this week. It's back and forth between doctors at this point. And this is all the result of my battle with COVID. So when I look at my scars, I see scars. My daughter says those are battle scars because so many of my colleagues in this state and in this nation did not survive COVID, and I did. And I'm living to tell my story, and this video is my story. And I'm thankful that I am among the living and that I can tell my story. Never, ever did I believe or even phantom the thought that I would get COVID to the point that it would cause a blood clot and change